now taking bets on if I'm going to be able to do this without crying. Hello out there, it is Carson, and I am back with something completely different here today. So obviously I'm a huge fan of horror, I'm a huge fan of Halloween Horror Nights, and I have kind of mentioned a few times before that part of my love for horror nights stems from my love of all things theater. Because when you think about it, the production design of haunted houses is not dissimilar to the production design of stage shows. I actually have a background in theater. It's one of my big passions. Not a performer anymore. I used to perform. These days, you will just catch me in the audience of some of my favorite shows. But that's what I wanted to talk about today because I found my giant Playbill collection. It is a little damaged. It's been through some stuff, but this is where I keep all of the playbills from the Broadway shows that I have seen. I have been going to shows since I was 5 years old. I ended up going to see a production of Les Miserables with my dad when I was 5 because my mom got like super sick with the flu and couldn't go. So I volunteered to go and they said, okay, take her. And if I had been completely miserable and hating it, we would have left, but I sat there and I was completely engaged, and it blew my mind to watch real people up on the stage and those incredible sets, and just the scale of it blew my young mind completely away. It was also all over for me when I was also very young and my mom decided to put on the original cast recording of the Phantom of the Opera. I can still to this day remember exactly where we were. We were in the car and it was all over for me after that. You might notice I found my Playbill, my program that I bought one of the times that I went to see Phantom in New York. Spoiler alert, there's a couple of Phantom playbills in here. That show changed the trajectory of my life, and I am not exaggerating when I say that. I was kind of set off down that road of theater by Les Mis, by listening to Phantom. And then very soon after that, I also saw Cats on stage for the first time. So I was being bombarded with all of this wonderful theater at a young age, and I just fell completely in love with it. I still love to go to shows. In fact, I am going to one at the time of recording next week. Super excited, already cried about it a few times, and it's a show that I've seen and I've already cried. I cry at basically every show I go to. It doesn't matter if it's happy or sad. I will be in tears before it's all said and done. And hey, I might be in tears today by the time this is all said and done going through these playbills. Today I'm going to stick strictly to the playbills in my collection that are from shows I have seen on Broadway. That in fact is what this is dedicated for. I only put New York shows in here just for the sake of, I don't know, I just like to be weirdly organized like that. I also want to acknowledge that yes, I have been extremely lucky to be able to go to New York like I have. My mom and I, it started as a tradition in 2013. I went up there to celebrate a birthday of mine, and it became like our yearly girls trip, our yearly pilgrimage up to New York, and the priority was always to see good shows. So we would save up and we'd plan which ones we wanted to go and see, because my mom, she used to go and do the same thing when she was younger. They would make a yearly trip to New York and see all kinds of wonderful theater. And this was back before you could buy tickets online, and somehow she would get tickets to like the hottest shows, like right after they had won awards, like Cats and A Chorus Line. She got to see the original casts of those, and I'm like, what? I wish I was you. But I'm so fortunate that we, for so many years, have been able to do that. I haven't been in the last year, just life, things change, life gets busy. I will definitely be back up there at some point in time. And in a post-COVID world, the theater scene has definitely changed a lot and travel has changed a lot. But I know at some point I'll be back up there. So without further ado, let's get into this. This is going to be in chronological order, starting with my very first Broadway show, going up into the most recent. So the year is 2013. I have never been to New York before. The Tony Awards have just happened recently. It's summertime. And we land in New York City, and my first experience in the shuttle van from JFK to our hotel, I was a little scared, I'm not gonna lie. The hustle and bustle got me, the crowds, the traffic, everything kind of was sensory overload in that moment. But the second we stepped out onto the street that evening, walking to get something to eat, before this first show, I kind of felt like, okay, I'm supposed to be here. And we started off with a bang. My very first Broadway show was Kinky Boots. I got to see the original cast of this very shortly after it had won the Tonys for Best Musical, and Billy Porter had won the award as well. This was the show to start off with. If you don't know anything about Kinky Boots, it is a phenomenal show based on a movie, but I feel like it was always supposed to be a musical about a factory in the UK that makes shoes, but after a chance run-in with a drag performer, the son of the factory owner, who is now in charge of the business, decides we need a line of shoes for drag queens that can support the weight of a full-grown man. So they kind of find this niche market and start making fabulous kinky boots for drag queens. Like halfway through the show, my mom turned to me and we just started like smiling and laughing because it's like, welcome to Broadway. This was amazing. My very first show ever, and I will never forget this night for as long as I live. Now, part of the reason for going up to New York was a lifelong dream of mine to see my favorite show of all time, The Phantom of the Opera. So our second night of that first trip up there, we got to see it, and it was the 25th anniversary of its run on Broadway. We actually see it at another point, at another anniversary in a few years down the road here in my collection. But dreams do come true. I got to see Phantom on Broadway. I was sitting right there, and the overture began and the chandeliers started to rise. And I don't know if I've ever felt more out of my body, more like this can't be happening, more of like I'm finally here, I finally made it. This meant so much to me, and I've seen it so many times. This is the show that I've seen the most. I've seen it several times when it had come through in touring casts where I live, but you know, there's seeing it, and then there's seeing it in the Majestic Theater on Broadway, and this was just perfection for me. I can't talk about Phantom for too long. It did close recently after an extensive run. Found out it was closing at Halloween Horror Nights, so that was not my favorite moment. I'm still kind of grieving it. I know that might sound silly, but it is a loss for me. It is such a blow, but I'm dealing with it. I can listen to it again, but it is something that's like really, really sad. I don't want to be sad talking about this, so let's move on. This next one was actually an off-Broadway show that we saw that first year. We ended up going to the TKTS stand and getting tickets for The Fantastics, one of the longest running off-Broadway shows, and something my mom had been wanting to see for years, and the opportunity presented itself, and it was so fun. This was such a just joyful, earnest, like intimate show in an off-Broadway theater. The music is beautiful. I still want to just weep when I hear the song Try to Remember from it, because it makes me think of the first time I ever got to go to New York with my mom. So that was the first year that I went. Those were the 3 shows. So this next batch is year number 2, and we arrived in our first night. Ooh, I remember this because we took the train up to New York several times. The first year we flew, but my mom does not like flying. I don't like flying either, but the train ride from Florida to New York is one of, like, genuinely one of the worst circles of hell that you can imagine. But hey, as my mom said, it got us to New York and back, minus a few incidents. We'll talk about that when we get a little further. But our first show off the train was beautiful, the Carole King musical. This night we also went to the Times Square Hard Rock Cafe. I don't know why we decided we needed to be like complete tourists, but we did. This is the musical based off of the life and obviously the music of Carole King, one of the most prolific songwriters. The album Tapestry is often touted as one of the best albums of all time. Saw the original cast with this. Lost my mind because Craig from Degrassi was in it, so that was really special for me. I loved this. I love the music of Carole King, and this one was just so well done. I loved it. I could definitely feel the earth move under my feet. That same trip, our next show was Once. You want to talk about a gut punch? This is it. This is the one. Once was like being punched in the chest while also listening to some of the best music you've ever heard. The whole thing about Once is that the actors and the musicians on stage are really playing instruments, and they have a bar up there. It is set in one location. The set does not change. It is in this pub, and you can actually go up on stage before the show and have a drink. and then the music kind of starts casually, like the musicians start playing, like you're in like an Irish pub, and then the lights dim and the show begins properly. And this is such a beautiful, beautiful musical. Again, another one based off of a movie, but I think the stage adaptation kind of surpassed the movie for me. Something about it just worked. I remember crying really, really hard about this one. My mom and I went to Sardi's afterwards, and she said, "That's just what happens in life, honey. Just that's reality sometimes," because I was so upset about it. Why am I so dramatic? I sound like I'm so depressed about all of these shows. I love them, but man, like there are so few musicals that end on like a happy note. But this next one kind of did. So we ended up being able to, we got this like handed this coupon that same trip up there for discounted tickets to see Idina Menzel and If Then. We thought it was a scam, but then when we called and they told us the price, we ended up getting like third row seats for a steal to this. And I was really stupid, and I actually asked before the show started, I said, "Do you think that everyone's gonna clap when she comes out on stage?" And my mom just looked at me like I was the dumbest person ever. And it was a dumb thing to ask. She walked out and she said, "Hey, it's me." And she had to pause for a long time because, of course, everyone was going nuts. It's Idina Menzel. So I still can't believe I got to see like her on Broadway. That was really, really awesome. This show was also one that put me in my feels, but I really liked it. This next show is my first show that I saw by myself in New York. So this was my third year going up there, and my mom's cousin was joining us, and she got in. She had to travel from across the country from the West Coast. So she and my mom had not seen each other in a while. They wanted to go out and catch up that night. So I thought like, okay, I'll just take myself out to a show. So I treated myself to go seeing Aladdin, and Aladdin was so much fun. So this one, I actually had bought the tickets because I really wanted to see James Monroe Iglehart as the genie because he had won the award for it recently. But the night I went, it was the understudy. And I have never been to another show where there was a standing ovation, not even halfway through the musical. But the understudy came out, and I didn't feel like disappointed because I know that, you know, I'm lucky to be in the theater watching anything at all. But he came out and totally just crushed it. It was amazing. This was worth the price alone to see like the almost 8-minute long Friend Like Me sequence. I love this musical so much. It was a lot of fun. Got to see the voice actor from the movie who played Jafar as Jafar, so that was really awesome. I had a great time at this, and it made me feel like, you know, like it was so grown up. Like, I'm in the city. I'm going to go take myself out to a show all by myself. I don't know. Maybe that's stupid, but fond memories of this one. So this next one is actually the first straight play that I saw on Broadway, the first non-musical. And this was my mom's cousin's idea and kind of the reason behind the trip, and we all met up. She wanted to see Wolf Hall, which is the story of Henry VIII and his wives. We know there's another very famous musical now, Six, but this is the play about it, and it was presented in 2 parts. So there's Wolf Hall, and then there was Bring Up the Body. So you could either choose to see both parts in one day or do one on like the day after each other. That's what we did. We saw part 1, and then the next day we saw part 2. The drama, the history of it, like even if you knew the story, a lot of people might not be familiar with Thomas Cromwell's, his whole hand in this whole debacle in history. It was mostly centered on him and the role that he played advising Henry VIII on what to do with all of the drama surrounding him wanting to divorce his first wife, and oh goodness, we need to get him somebody else who can give him an heir. Enter Anne Boleyn. This was so crazy good. I still get chills when I think about the ending of this one. So this was like the 2-parter of the century. This was like drama. This was real, like gritty, like on the edge of your seat theater. So loved it. The last show of that trip was another last minute one for my mom and I. We ended up getting tickets on Today Tix, which is another really great way to see shows up there. You can buy discounted tickets the day of, and somebody will actually come and bring you the tickets and meet you outside of the theater before it's time to go in. So I had heard great things about this show, had never seen this or the movie adaptation of this before. It has become one of my favorite shows of all time, definitely in my top 5, and that show is Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I really adore this show, and I got to see Darren Criss in it. My mom adored this as well. It was so funny. We still joke about this. She's like, what, do you think I'm some kind of old lady? You think I haven't lived my life? Because before we went into the theater, as we were walking in, I said, you know what this show is about, right? And she was like, yes, you think I haven't seen things? So it was really funny. This show will have you laughing one minute, and then the next thing you know, you're like, oh, okay, I'm crying. The themes of being able to accept things, that maybe you won't get the apology that you're looking for, maybe you won't get the recognition that you feel you're deserved, but you are still a whole person, you still matter. This one really resonated with me. I still listen to the soundtrack to this all the time. I love the movie, of course. I think John Cameron Mitchell really did something when he made this show. I think it's a really important piece of representation for the LGBTQ plus community as well. And in fact, we got to see this. You might notice that all of the last few Playbills, it was during Pride season, so we have the Pride bills for all of these. This show is great, and I would urge everyone to at least give the movie a chance, because it's not 100% what you're expecting. New year, new shows. Next up on our next trip up to New York City was Shuffle Along, or the making of the musical sensation of 1921 and all that followed. I got to see a very pregnant Audra McDonald tap dance on stage. I got to see Billy Porter in another show again. This was a high energy, this one had you like wanting to just get up and dance yourself. Unfortunately, this show came out the same year that Hamilton did, so a lot of people overlooked it. I have not seen Hamilton on Broadway. I've seen it on the touring production. I love Hamilton, but there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to afford to go see that in New York. But getting to see this, like, I really wanted to see this. I watched the performance on TV when they did the Tonys, and it made me want to go see this even more. A lot of interesting history, given the era, or around the era, that people might not know about. There was a little dig at Gershwin in there that I wasn't expecting, but I don't think enough noise got made about this show, and I think due to Audra McDonald, queen of Broadway, she was pregnant, and I think that when she had to leave the show and be replaced, that kind of like hurt this one. It didn't have a long enough run, in my opinion. I love this show. I will ride hard for this show. Maybe we should revive it someday, but I feel like it got overlooked. The next day we saw An American in Paris, and my goodness, the talent on that stage, the dancing that we got to see. This was a beautiful musical. So much so that when we saw that the lead was going to be in the touring cast and it was going to go to Orlando, my mom and I immediately got tickets to go see it again, because we had to go see the performer that was in it. We adored this one. I think that it's just a beautiful take on a classic movie. If you like dance, there of course is dialogue and singing, but this one is so much about like the movement on the stage. This one's gorgeous. Then we saw another straight play. This one means even more to me now that I have been to Salem, but I knew I had to go see The Crucible. We saw Saoirse Ronan, Ben Whishaw, Sophie Okonedo, Ciarán Hinds, and this cast was insane. A more modern take on The Crucible. The set, the lighting. There was a wolf that came on stage at one point. This was tense. This was scary. And I loved every second of it. I would definitely put this in my top shows that we got to see on Broadway. And now that I've been to the Salem Witch Museum in Salem, which is like the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life, it makes it even more scarier for me. The last show we saw of that trip was another last minute one that we got tickets real cheap for, and it was Finding Neverland. So there is a movie by the same name. The movie is not a musical, but it is the telling of how J.M. Barrie wrote the story of Peter Pan and the family that kind of inspired it. I cried so hard at this show, I thought I was going to throw up. I know that sounds gross, but I cried so hard I almost made myself physically sick. And this was a very like family-friendly show, and there were children all around us, and I'm there like actually weeping like a lunatic. but I to this day cannot listen to the soundtrack of this show in the car, because when I cried again so hard that I thought I was going to drive my car off the road. So I can only listen to this one up to a certain point. The last like 15 minutes of the show, no. When they go, because spoiler alert, the mother of the family is very, very sick and she does not survive. When they perform Peter Pan for her because she's too sick to go to the premiere in the house. No, I can't even talk about it right now. I'm getting a lump in my throat. The show is so good, but it broke me. All right, so fun story about this next one. This next trip up to New York was not my finest moment. I was going through some really tough stuff personally, emotionally. I was an absolute wreck on the way up to New York this year. And on that note, we got into a train wreck. We got into a train crash. We had not left the station very far when we were crossing over like where the road goes across the train tracks, and a semi truck thought it could make it before the gates went down. And fortunately, no one was hurt, but our train did hit a semi truck and cracked the glass at the front car of the train. So we had to get a new engine car. That was fun. So it was very, very fitting that, you know, I was a wreck. We were in a wreck. Still, we survived. We made it to New York. And again, my mom's cousin was with us this time. So I decided to make it a tradition. They wanted to go have a chill girls' night. I wanted to see a show. I was not about to let a night go past in New York without seeing a show. So I bought myself tickets to go see Miss Saigon. I sat in the second row for so cheap. I could have reached over the first row and touched the stage. And to this day, John Briones as the engineer in this show is one of, if not the best performance I've ever seen. His The American Dream in this adaptation was flawless, amazing. It's like the 11 o'clock number of the show. And the fact that he was not nominated for a Tony that year is an absolute robbery, a tragedy. And a couple nights later, we were walking by and I happened to see that he was stage dooring. So I jumped in line and I actually met him and told him that like it was one of the best performances I'd ever seen. I have pictures of that. I will not put them in here because I look horrible in the pictures, but I got to meet him and tell him that he was awesome. So this was really great. This was another one that does not end on a happy note, and I cried really, really hard, but hey, that's Broadway. Okay, cheating a bit, but it does say Playbill on it. On that same trip, we went to the Met to see the American Ballet Theater do Swan Lake. So this was the Playbill from that. And it was on that day that I discovered that I guess a lot of people don't know how Swan Lake ends, because the gasps when she jumped off the cliff at the end were so loud. It was like when you go to SeaWorld and the whales and stuff jump out of the water and everyone gasps. I'm not exaggerating. It was like that. So I was trying not to laugh really hard because I thought people knew how Swan Lake ended, but this was awesome. I mean, it was the Met. Come on. There were the costumes, the sets, there was fire on stage at one point. This was my first like proper ballet that I had seen, and I absolutely adored it. And then we came with my mom's cousin. My mom's cousin is very in tune to like the straight plays that are going on up there. She was less of a musical person and more of like, I want to go see the plays, and I'm about that too. So we went and we saw Kevin Kline in Present Laughter. So this was a comedy to rival all comedies. Kevin Kline, his timing was so genius. I got to see Kobe Smulders from How I Met Your Mother and the Marvel Cinematic Universe in this as well. This was a delight, and this was one of the first shows with like an actor. Like I saw him, Idina Menzel, of course, but this was one of those people that's like, you know him from movies like The Big Chill, and he was Phoebus in Hunchback of Notre Dame. So part of me wasn't expecting him to actually be there, but when he walked out on stage, I was like, oh, that's Kevin Kline, because I'm so stupid. But this was so much fun. Loved this one. We actually saw another straight play on this trip, The Little Foxes. This one was kind of famous because it had Cynthia Nixon and Laura Linney in it, but they would trade roles. Like one night, one would play a part, and then the next night they would switch. And this one also had Michael McKean in it and Richard Thomas. This was a star-studded cast. It was a Southern Gothic. They used words like high-toned, and it was just so dramatic and just dripping with like disdain for each other. I loved it. It was giving me all the drama that I needed. This was really kind of surreal again, because like I was a fan of Sex and the City, getting to see Cynthia Nixon. I freaking love Love Actually, so getting to see Laura Linney was exciting. Oh, and The Truman Show. So another one of like those out of body experiences. Like, am I really seeing these people on stage right now? But great, great, great time. We're at the beginning of a new summer of shows here, and this was one that I specifically wanted to see, and once I kind of told my mom about it, she was really intrigued by it as well. I knew this was another one that was based off of a movie. Have we noticed that Broadway is kind of trending towards movie adaptations? I'm not saying that that's always a bad thing, but just something kind of interesting. But we saw our first night in town, The Band's Visit, and I will directly quote from the show here that it is about a group of musicians who come to Israel from Egypt. You probably didn't hear about it. It wasn't very important. And, you know, obviously, like mentioning those two places, your mind immediately goes to like all kinds of tensions that could arise. But instead of playing into that, these musicians that go to the wrong city and end up stranded, they are taken in by the locals in this small town where it seems not that much exciting happens, and through human connection and interaction, the plot kind of reveals itself. There's a number in this show called Answer Me, and it is one of the most beautiful pieces of music that I have ever heard in a show. And I remember this one ended, I felt like I had been kicked in the chest, and my mom is just sitting there shaking her head, and she goes, I don't even know what to say, because this was on another level. Sometimes something so simple without huge sets. In fact, the set is just like beige, nothing all that special, to kind of capture the boring essence of this city where nothing ever happens, but everything important about it comes from the interactions of the characters, and something so earnest and something just so simple can really, really resonate with you. I remember this day, I woke up with one of the worst headaches I had ever had in my whole life. I was really, really not having a good time that morning, but it was a 2-show day for us. That's right. For the first time, we went to 2 shows. We did a matinee and we did an evening performance. And our first show was Hello, Dolly, one of my favorite classic shows. I love this one. I'm obsessed with the movie. But we went to see Miss Bernadette Peters in this, and it was awesome. And Victor Garber was in this too. I saw him, we were waiting to go in, and I saw him at the stage door holding a salad. And I know that's not that exciting, but there's this real dumb picture of me making a face like that my mom took, and you can see like tiny Victor Garber in the background by the door holding his salad. Love this, love Hello, Dolly. Put on your Sunday clothes, y'all. And then that night we went to Anastasia, and 5-year-old me lost her mind. I cried really, really, really hard at this one again, because this movie, I listened to this, I watched this, I danced around in my living room pretending like I was in the scene Once Upon a December. Journey to the Past is what killed me about this one. Different from the movie though, Rasputin is not in it. There's a much more real historical threat here. It makes it feel a little more grown up, a little more adult. Obviously Bartok the Bat is not in it as well. That's fine. I know sometimes things have to change, but the music that we know and love from the movie added, with some other songs added on top of it as well. I love this. And then I saw the tour when it came to town as well. I love Anastasia. I was an Anastasia girl more than I ever was like any of the Disney princesses. Fun fact about me. And the last show of that trip was Phantom of the Opera again. So this was the 30th anniversary that we got to see it. This was my second time watching it on Broadway. My last time getting to see it on Broadway, unfortunately. But, you know, I have good memories. I have my love for this show that is never going to go anywhere. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be something really special and really important about me. Can you see that I'm like actually tear? I told y'all I wasn't going to make it through this without getting emotional, but I love Phantom. I will always love Phantom, and maybe one day, you know, it will come back. And no more crying. So new year, this was a banner year. Let's just go ahead and say that this next lineup is probably one of like the strongest of the bunch. I have never seen a bad show on Broadway, but the second I heard about this new adaptation of Oklahoma, I was on board. None of the text was changed really, kept all the songs, but I affectionately call this one Dark Oklahoma because, spoilers, they ended the show covered in blood. This was unsettling, this was uncomfortable, this was scary, this was everything that I needed. This was at Circle in the Square, so you're sitting kind of around, not entirely surrounding the stage in this one, but they kept the lights on. They kept the house lights on. They never really dimmed the lights. There were a few times where the lights went completely out, but that was part of the experience. You got to see everyone else's reactions. It made you uncomfortable. The walls were lined with just wood panels and guns and streamers, and every detail of how they chose to revive this production was done to unsettle you and to bring out the dark subtext that has always been there about Oklahoma. Saw this one, I think, the day after or 2 days after it won Best Revival. I got to see Ali Stroker in this. I know she was Ado Annie. She had a lot of acclaim for playing the part, and she won the Tony as well. We stage doored this, and I got my Playbill signed by the cast. This was, I think, my only signed Playbill that I've gotten, but we were so just blown away by this that we had to, I had to stick around. I had to like tell these people how amazing they were. Not in like a weird, I fangirled out kind of way, but just in like a, hey, that was really cool. That was some of the best theater I've ever seen. So this was awesome. Anybody that got to see this was absolutely lucky. The next show of the trip, this is the best show I have ever seen. This is the best show I have ever seen. And again, it had just won Best Musical a few days before. Standing in line to go inside, everyone around us talking about how excited they were to see this. I scored us. I knew. I had been watching this show when it was off Broadway. I had been following this for several years. And I snagged us second row tickets to Hadestown. And this is actually the show that, as I'm recording it right now, I am going to go see next week. I have already cried a few times about this really, really hard. This is the epitome of theater. So if you don't know anything about Hadestown, this is the myth of Hades and Persephone and Orpheus and Eurydice done by way of like New Orleans style jazz. Another one where the instruments and the music is all done on stage. This is gorgeous. The music is amazing. It doesn't matter if you know how these myths end. This one will have you yearning and hoping, and as they say, like, to the world we dream about and the one we live in now, it is full of hope and longing and love, and it is just the best thing I've ever seen on stage. And unfortunately, I made really awkward eye contact with Reeve Carney because this was the original cast. He saw me open mouth crying at the curtain call. So I have to live with that for the rest of my life. Like, oh, the guy that was Dorian Gray on Penny Dreadful saw me openly weeping. Cool, real fun. I'm so excited to see this again. I'm so excited to take my husband. Maybe one day I'll get to go back up to New York and see this. I did look at tickets for this next trip, my most recent trip to New York. And word got out about Hadestown, and those tickets are a little too expensive for me right now. But maybe one day, you know, when she comes into some money, I might be able to go see it again. And then the last one of this trip, another one of my favorite classic musicals, Kiss Me, Kate. My college did this one, and that's what made me kind of obsessed with it. What was fun about this was a neighbor of ours from like basically my whole childhood actually lives up in New York and came and met us in the city, and we all got to go see a show together, and this was just beautiful. I got to see another Broadway queen, Kelly O'Hara, in this one. The dancing was phenomenal. I love the sets. Oh, I got to see Corbin Bleu from High School Musical in it also, so that was really cool. I'm a sucker for some of these like classics, and this is one of the best ones. The music is so catchy. You probably know some of the music from this one, even if you don't, like, you haven't seen it. Some of the stuff would probably be familiar to most people. And now we have arrived at my last and most recent trip to New York. This was a couple of years ago. This was after COVID. We had to take a hiatus for a few years, but I was so glad to be back. And our first show that we saw was Moulin Rouge. I am obsessed with the movie. This is one of my top 5 movies of all time. I don't care what anybody says about it. I don't care if it's cheesy and bright and frantic. I love Baz Luhrmann's style, and this was screaming to be a musical. The musical is not exactly the same as the movie. In fact, only a few songs from the movie are in the musical. This is a jukebox musical. They use entirely, well, Come What May was an original for the movie, but they use almost entirely known music in this, and the things that they have added, it just works. This show, the opening number alone, my mom and I were stunned at the energy on the stage. We left this show tired as could be after watching them give their all up there. This was a fun one because it was kind of like there was no fourth wall. You were a patron of the Moulin Rouge watching this all unfold. It was very much like the audience was a part of things. The sets, oh my gosh, the elephant, the windmill, it was all there. I was crying. The Elephant Love medley, it got to me, okay? Like, I freaking love Moulin Rouge. I'm not going to be embarrassed about that. And I just think that you have to be like a triple threat to be in this. The number that started Act 2, it was called Backstage Romance. It's Lady Gaga's Bad Romance, Britney Spears' Toxic. They throw Seven Nation Army in there by the White Stripes. Like, it was one of the best numbers I've ever seen on stage. This one was just like, whoa, just bowled us over. It was awesome, and it kind of like reignited my Moulin Rouge face a little bit. Now, if I had to pick, I know I said Hadestown is the best show I've ever seen. I stand by that. My mom and I often talk about, like, if you had to pick the best thing we've seen on Broadway. And we're always like, I can't answer that. That's too hard. I don't know if I can answer that. I don't know if that's fair. I think this next thing might be it. Maybe for both of us, but maybe at least for me. This was the reason for our trip. This is what got us going back to New York after COVID, after the first wave of COVID. It's not over yet, unfortunately. But after it was safer to go back up there again, this show was the reason why. This was announced pre-COVID. The cast was announced for this play. And I remember reading it and then like running to my mom to show her who was going to be in this show. Because this was one that she had seen before. Many, many, many years ago, back a long time ago when she was going to New York. She saw Al Pacino in this show. And I turned to her when we get to the theater for this one, and I said, did you ever think all these years later that you'd be here with your daughter seeing this again? And she said, no. Al Pacino, actually, she was so close to the stage in this one that Al Pacino spit on her. So in keeping with the spirit of this show, we had to go. We had to go when we heard about it. We had to go when we heard the cast. And we had to get front row tickets for this. This was the splurge that we had to do because of how much we both love this play. I feel like I'm building up to some like grand reveal. I guess I am a little bit. I actually learned about this play and dove deep into it for a project that I had to do for school. Like I said, I studied theater. Everybody in one of my senior classes had to pick a famous playwright and do kind of a deep dive into their style, their famous works, and you really had to focus on a couple of shows that were in their repertoire of shows. I picked David Mamet because I was aware of his works, I was aware of his style, very, very distinct use of language, very, very distinct dialogue, and I thought that we really need to study him. And the show that I chose to really dive into was American Buffalo by him. I did not realize when I picked that as my topic that that was the show that my mom had seen Al Pacino in, that he had spit on her and almost accidentally hit her with one of the props on stage. So it was kind of like fate, I guess, that was my topic, and that's what I chose. I love American Buffalo. I could probably do an entire like TED Talk style teach about American Buffalo. So when it was announced that they were reviving this on Broadway with Darren Criss, Lawrence Fishburne, and Sam Rockwell, I lost my mind. Well, COVID happens, and then I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're ever still going to do it. But then they do. A couple years later, they decide to do it again. Same cast, and we got tickets, and we got to see three icons. My mother is obsessed with Sam Rockwell, obsessed. But you could not have picked a more perfect cast for this play. I love this play because the American dream is different for everyone. The American dream for some people is crime and stealing. The set, the pawn shop in this was amazing. These men mesmerized me on stage. This was probably the highlight of my theater going life. This was worth every penny. And I have a side story to tell about this. This is one of the best parts of it. So we're sitting in the front row, we're waiting. And again, this is at Circle in the Square where we saw Oklahoma. So you're facing people on the other side of the stage. We're down front by the stage juts out. I can see across. So I'm looking. We did have to wear masks, of course. We were still masking in the theaters. So I got my mask on. I'm looking across the way. I see other people. They have their masks on. And then I look. And I see somebody that I think I recognize. And I'm looking. Not in like a weird way. But I'm just sitting there looking. And then I look next to this person. And there's this woman. And I recognize the top half of the woman as well. That's so-and-so's girlfriend. So I turn to my mom and I go, okay, Mom, I need you to look across the way. I think Keanu Reeves is sitting across from us. And she turns and she looks and she goes, oh my God, that's him. And I was sitting there and he made eye contact with me. We were at American Buffalo with Keanu Reeves. Like, he was there, he was right there. And I thought it was so fun because it was Lawrence Fishburne and they were in the Matrix movies together. But what was so cool about it was that no one was like freaking out. No one was making a big deal out of it or bothering him. A couple people said, hey, and like, enjoy your work and everything. But everyone was so chill about it. I didn't go up to him because like, what was I going to say? Like, oh, I love Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Like, I was not worthy, but everyone was so cool about it. He and his girlfriend were there and it was just very, very casual. There was no aura of like, pretentiousness and I'm a celebrity. All accounts of him, like, you never read a bad story about him. Everybody loves him and says he's one of the nicest humans ever. He really did seem like that. But that was so cool. Like, it was like, oh my God, Keanu is here. There's a celebrity. But that is one of my favorite stories. It's like, I got to see American Buffalo with Keanu Reeves. And the last Broadway show that I have seen as of right now is Company. This was one that I am glad I did not see until this trip. Company is a show that I think you could only really understand once you reach a certain age, once you reach that adulthood, and when are you going to settle down? When are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to start a normal life? This really speaks to that feeling and that sort of societal expectation and pressure. This was a gender swapped version of Company. So this originally, this is Bobby right here. Katrina Link, who I saw in the band's visit. She's fabulous. Bobby was always a man before this, but they decided for this revival to make Bobby a woman because think about it. There's less pressure for men to have to settle down than there is for a woman. So Bobby turns 35 and it's about her interacting with all of the people in her life and what their lives look like, what love looks like for them, what settling down looks like. And I got to see the fabulous Miss Patti LuPone in this as well. The pre-show announcement for this was great because she threatened everyone to turn their cell phones off or else, because Miss Patti does not play about cell phones and rudeness in the theater. And I think she is correct for that. But this one really spoke to me, and I think my mom as well, because, you know, my mom was a strong single woman for a lot of her life, and she didn't buy into the ideals of you have to settle down by a certain age. So I think this was one that you kind of have to mature into being able to see. It was beautiful, it was funny, it was just tugging at your heartstrings the whole time, and it was a really good note to be able to go out on for my last trip to New York. So that does it for my playbills as of right now. I still have some room in my binder. Hopefully my collection will be growing. I am constantly on the lookout for what tours are coming here and going to local little theaters around here as well. I love theater of any and all kinds. If you've never given it a try, check out some of your local things. Most cities have like a small theater group or some sort of theater club going on. I'm a big proponent of going and supporting local theater as well. It's so fun. It's a lot of hard work, and it really does take talent and dedication to put shows on. I have it as my happy place. It's something for me to do that helps me relax, helps me escape from the reality of the world for a little while. And And I'm really glad that when I was so young, my parents took a chance and decided to expose me to these things. I think that's really important. So I would love to hear anybody else's thoughts about any of these shows, any good shows you've seen lately. And in the meantime, I will be counting down the days until I get to go see my next performance.